Welcome in to the 48 Minutes podcast by Believe, presented by Bet Online. I'm Ross Geiger, joined alongside World B, Michael Freer, and this is your emergency podcast as we learned earlier this afternoon that the Milwaukee Bucks relieved head coach Adrian Griffin of his duties. As we found out here as of taping here tonight, Doc Rivers has accepted the head coaching job with the Milwaukee Bucks. But we'll be real quick here. Let's start with the initial news that obviously came as a surprise to many, just 43 games into the Bucks season. And I saw that come across my Twitter feed, and I got to be honest, I was surprised, but not all that shocked. So what I really want to do here for this emergency podcast is first break it down on why I'm not that shocked. Well, for one, as you can attest to, on our podcast, I haven't really been too high on the Bucks this year. I caught a lot of those wins as fool's gold, and some of that fool's gold continued this past weekend in Detroit. I mean, the Bucks were really out there scratching and clawing, having to fight back in games to beat the Detroit Pistons in their back-to-back road set in Detroit. And right now is the window of opportunity for this team. I mean, there is no patience for developing a head coach. This is a team that needs to win now. You look at this roster, they're only getting older, and they're only going to start declining. Brook Lopez, they signed to a 2-year deal to keep him away from the Houston Rockets. He's at the back half of his career. Chris Middleton, while he's not playing like NBA Finals Chris Middleton right now, he's probably playing close to his best basketball that we're going to get at this stage of his career, along with the fact that he's had, an injury, past injuries that have really kind of caught up to him with age. And then you got Dame Lillard in town. Obviously, that really escalated things for the Bucks as far as expectations are concerned. And while he hasn't had the best start in Milwaukee, having a lot of sluggish games shooting the basketball, I mean, he's still averaging about 25 points a game, closing out ball games for this team. And really what, when I reflected on the news and why it was done now is just the fact that, yes, the Bucks are 30-13 on the season, second in the Eastern Conference. But in all reality, I think we all know that this team is not in a position right now to battle the Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia 76ers in a 7-game series, maybe not even the Miami Heat come playoff Jimmy time. So
don't forget Cleveland.
And Cleveland. And I would even throw Indiana in there too, World B, because they just made an improvement with Pascal Siakam. They might have another trade in store with some of the pieces that are now out of the rotation, like Obi Toppin, Buddy Hield's names out there. They might make another splash, and the Bucks have had troubles even beating them this year. So the biggest thing for me, and then I'll turn it over to you to get your initial thoughts, is just the fact that, the 30 wins, I call them fool's gold because how many of those were actually good wins? How many of those games did they get out ahead in the first half and get to rest those starters? We haven't seen a lot of those games, and that's going to catch up to an aging team. All right. I mean, it's a simple fact. They just didn't take care of business early enough in games. They didn't execute well enough. And unfortunately, in this case, it is a players' league, and typically the coaches are the ones that take the fall for that. So I just think sometimes even with the results saying they're 30-13, well, not a lot of those were great wins. And right now they really need great wins to kind of prove to themselves where they're at in this season, and then also being able to rest those starters a bit. But I'll turn it over to you, World B. I'd love to get your thoughts on just the initial news and what you thought about the decision to do this now.
The decision, it was a stunner just in that it happened. Usually you hear rumors about something like this before it actually happened. This came really out of the blue. Nobody was expecting it on a Tuesday.
Right.
It's, if you look at it, I agree with you, 30-13, tied for the second best record in the league. But if you really think about, are they really any closer to beating the Celtics than when the season started? It doesn't feel like it from this team. And it's all defense, which is a real shocker. He was supposed to, Griffin was supposed to come in. It was supposed to be that mindset. It's a shocker from that standpoint. It's not a shocker when you look at it from personnel standpoint. It's, you give up Drew Holiday, you get Dame Lillard. You're going to regress on defense. The problem is they really have regressed. I mean, they scored 263 points in beating the Pistons over the weekend in 2 games, and they didn't win either game by double digits. I mean, they scored that many points, and they couldn't put them away. And the game before that, they get blown out by 40 to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Giannis doesn't play. I get it. But Giannis isn't the difference between losing by 10 and losing by 40. I'm sorry. It's not. Yeah. It's all about defense with this team, and they lack it right now. They're having a terrible time defensively. For the year, they're in the bottom 10. And I've mentioned this before in previous podcasts. In the last 24, 25 years, only one team has won a championship ranked below 20th or below in defensive efficiency. I think that was the Lakers in like 2000. That's how far back you have to go. You have to play defense to win in this league. Offense is a big deal. Offense is where you want to win. They're the second best offense right behind the Pacers in efficiency, in shooting, and they're on their way to passing the Pacers. It's that close now when we all thought the Pacers had this great offense, and they still do. But the Bucks slowly are going to surpass them, it looks like, offensively. Defensively, it's a train wreck. 28th in the league this month in defensive efficiency. The 3 teams behind them, they're only ahead of 3 teams this month. Portland, Detroit, Golden State. Those 3 teams have won 7 of 30 games this month. It's awful what's going on, and that's what really had to happen for this team. They're bringing in Doc because Doc coaches defense, we're told, and he coaches stars. So in that respect, it's a fit. Once we get to the playoffs, who knows? I was surprised that it happened because I would have thought he'd get the season, given the Celtics gave Missoula the season last season and brought him back, and there are critics all over about him, and still are probably, but they're winning now, so those critics have died down. So I'm a little surprised it happened in season, but we've talked about it all season. This hasn't been a good start to the season for the Bucks, and I'm sure the front office sees it slipping away.
And you brought up Missoula, so let's definitely go there real quick. Obviously, that's the most recent historic example of a first-year head coach that struggled, needed some development. What it really boils down to, and the difference between those 2 teams, if you ask me, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is just the fact that their windows of opportunity are so much different. I mean, we were talking about a Boston team that is ran by 2 younger stars in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, with a full career still ahead of them in their mid-20s. This team, the way the roster is compiled, does not have that kind of time. And that kind of gets me to the point that where that Terry Stotts news at the beginning of the year when he walked away from the team, that really was like the beginning of the end, if you ask me. I mean, whether it be Terry Stotts hoping, I think a lot of Bucks fans hope that he would be the guy that kind of helped lead this offense. Well, I think when Terry Stotts left, a lot of that offensive strategy left with him, because what ended up happening with this team is the fact that, I mean, we didn't see Dame Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo in a ton of pick and roll scenarios. We saw a lot of standing around and not a lot of good ball movement, not a lot of structure to that offense. And you mentioned the defense as well. And I think, the announcement of Doc Rivers taking over as head coach, it's going to at least bring one thing, and that is a resume and credibility that, unfortunately, no fault of Adrian Griffin's, he just doesn't have yet. So I really fully expect Doc Rivers to hold these guys accountable, or at least have the resume to call guys out, especially big name stars like Giannis and Dame, because he's been there before. He's had big name stars. He's proven he can win with those stars. And unfortunately, Adrian Griffin did not have that. So if he started to lose the locker room over not being able to hold those guys accountable, maybe that is a reflection on the bad defensive numbers.
It very well could be. They're all good points. I don't necessarily know if Doc is the answer if you're trying to win a championship. If you're trying to improve your team, I think he's a good choice to come in and right the ship. I don't know if he is, let's face it, you can go look at the records. The number of times he's blown series leads as a coach, it's out there. It's on record. He's blown plenty of had the advantage in plenty of series and couldn't close them out. He does have the title. He gets full credit for that. But after that, go back and look. 3-1 series leads, 3-2 series leads, 2-0 series leads, out the window. So, we'll see what happens as far as that goes when they get to the postseason. If you go back, and you can honestly go back to our interview on 48 Minutes with Giannis on our podcast back in September before the season started. How much attention every little thing that he said in our podcast drew nationally. I mean, he made a comment about the future, about his he didn't say he was leaving, but he wanted to make sure everybody knew that, if things aren't done right, you'll have to explore my options. A week or so later, here comes Dame Lillard. Everything sounds great. Everything's going great. Then you had Terry Stotts before the season walking out in it after a verbal, argument with Griffin that, really turned some head. The whole season just there hasn't been a lot of positivity around this season. And it's a really strange thing when you're 30-13 and have to answer negative questions all the time. But I mean, that's the nature of the business. And that's the situation they put themselves in. You go get Damian Lillard. Giannis, wanted another star, wanted to ensure his future. They went out and got something for him. And now it's, now the expectation. Now it's on you guys. Now it's on the players. And like we said, they're 30-13, tied for the second best record in the league. But who really feels they're any closer to a championship right now than when the season started? And the game changer really was when the Celtics got Drew Holiday from Boston or from Milwaukee. When they picked up that was a game changer in the eyes of many, because while he's not, a superstar level player anymore, the fact that they got him to match up with, not only separate him from Milwaukee, but get him on Boston, that really changed the perception, because right up until then, it was Milwaukee on paper. Everybody thought Milwaukee was going to win. And then all of a sudden, the Celtics get Drew Holiday to solidify their rotation. And now you go, wow, that offense and add him. And the numbers bear it out, whether you like it or not. Boston is the best team in the league, and the numbers bear it out on both ends of the court.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I'm glad you brought up the Giannis interview, because he really emphasized just everyone being on the same page, all about winning. And clearly throughout this season, despite the record, once again, they have not been on the same page, whether it be defense, whether it be offense at times, and obviously internally with the coaching staff, with Terry Stotts leaving. So I don't know if Doc Rivers can get everybody on the same page in a short amount of time, just kind of being thrown into the fire here. But at least he's a proven, experienced coach, has, a championship under his belt. And like I said, what I'm holding on to as the Bucks optimistic fan here is the fact that he's going to have the guts, and he's going to have the respect of that locker room just based on who he is and what he's accomplished throughout his career. Now, I get the fact that he has had some problems in the playoffs, but the Bucks do now have the luxury of having, in my eyes, the most dominant player in the game in Giannis, and one of, if not the best closer in basketball in Damian Lillard. So how you utilize those guys down the stretch, how do you utilize them throughout the course of the game? Hopefully a lot better than what we saw with Adrian Griffin. And that's kind of what I'm, holding on to my hopes with.
For me, it's just, what can Doc do to turn around the defense? This is on the players. If they want to play defense, if they want to change their fortunes in this league, because, in December, their defense really played well. They were the number one team in opponent field goal percentage in the month of December. Number one, teams are shooting just over 50% in effective field goal percentage, and now they're in the bottom 10 again this month. And if you go and look at their schedule, they do not have a fun schedule coming up, with Cleveland back-to-back coming up the next two games, a team that just beat them by the hottest team in the league, by the way, right now this month. They're the best team this month. The Cavaliers destroying teams. And now you get
8
them
wins in a
back-to-back.
row.
Yeah, 8 in a row, and they're beating teams by 20 points a game in this thing. It's ridiculous. And including, like I mentioned before, Milwaukee by 40. So you got them back-to-back. You got to go play the Pelicans, who are playing really well. Then you get the defending champs on the road. Then you get Dallas a few games after that. Then you get Phoenix a few games after that. I mean, this is big time, basketball we're talking here for as far as being tested. And you start going into a slump defensively against these teams. 30-13 becomes 30-20 real quick, and you're going, all right, where's our season at? So from that standpoint, I can understand making the move when it happened. I was obviously a little surprised. I can understand it, but it's on the players to change the defense. If they can improve the defense, their offense is clicking. Their offense with Giannis and Dame on the court together are dominating now. They're really playing well. Do they want to play the defense that's needed to win in this league? Look at what Denver did last year, Ross. We were talking about their defense going into that postseason. It was average at best during the season. And they stepped it up when they had to do it in the playoffs, especially in the finals against Miami. They really dominated defensively, which you never thought would happen against the Miami Heat. Play better defense than a team like Miami. But they did, and that's why they ended up winning the title. Can those guys play defense? You got to believe they can. I mean, Giannis is Defensive Player of the Year. Brook Lopez is still a great defender in the post. Chris Middleton's a very good defender. So they have the players. Can they play defense? And if Doc can get them to play defense, things can turn around, and they can, it's funny to say be a contender when you're the second best record in the league. But yeah, we can talk about them again as being challengers to the Celtics for the NBA title.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be interesting to see what ends up happening with this coaching staff in Milwaukee with Doc Rivers in charge now. How many assistants will he keep? Who might he bring in? I would certainly think he's going to bring in a defensive-minded coach to help out with this team, maybe keep Joe Prunty, who was named interim throughout the negotiations today. Very short title for interim this time around for Prunty in Milwaukee.
Did he get the bump in salary for going from assistant to head coach for a few hours? Is that,
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he got bargained that in the agreement there.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how many of the current staff members will stay around, who he might bring into his own brain trust, that is Doc Rivers. And then, of course, will be another important piece is we have the trade deadline right around the corner. So one thing we also know about Doc Rivers is he doesn't really tend to play young guys. This group has a lot of younger guys. They don't have at least at the end of the bench there, they've got a couple draft picks and Marjon Beauchamp, who is a promising sophomore in the NBA this year. And they don't have a lot of draft capital or obviously names that they can trade. But, can you get a Matisse Thybulle at the deadline? I'm just throwing out a random example of a guy on a team that might be looking to trade. I'm curious to see what they're able to attract at the deadline with the younger pieces and a few second-round picks that they have to see who can fit what Doc's trying to do defensively. And then also with Doc Rivers in town and with his background of having stops at so many different franchises around the league, who might want to play for him in Milwaukee? PJ Tucker's a guy that always comes to mind because he did win a championship with the Bucks, played with Doc Rivers in Philadelphia just last season. I'm curious to see who Doc Rivers kind of links with in the buyout market and what the Bucks do to try to help Doc and what Doc's trying to accomplish with this defense come the deadline.
I would say the buyout market is more of a possibility with this franchise right now than actual trades. I don't think there are a lot of assets, nor do I think the Bucks can afford to just get rid of assets to pick up somebody. We talk about you got to give up something to get something. Yep. What exactly do the Bucks have that they can give up and get back that's going to improve this team that much? They're when they got Damian Lillard, when they got their bench was tightened up, and we were talking about that was something we mentioned before the season. This was going to be on the starters, and I think the buyout market is more of a possibility for this team to pick up something. Now, who's out there? I mean, can you get Evan Fournier at the with the Knicks for that shooter off the bench? I don't know if they definitely need some outside. I think still need some outside firepower, but he's not a noted defender, so I don't know necessarily how that would work out. But yeah, it's going to come down to Doc will get him better. Doc will get a lot of attention there, having been a Marquette grad and all that. Yep. Coming back to Milwaukee is a nice storyline. But this is a franchise. They're not supposed to compete for a title. They're supposed to win the title. That's why you get Damian Lillard. They're supposed to win these things. And right now, the Bucks front office thought they were, with a 30-13 record, that they was falling further behind, the Celtics, and I don't disagree with that. And we were talking about right now. There's not a lot of positivity surrounding this franchise right now, which is really weird when you have the stars they have and they have the record that they have. But like you said, something wasn't right, and if Doc can come in and make things right, they have the power. They have the players to compete for a title. They have it. They have to close the gap with Boston somehow. That's just how it is.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what transpires here in the next couple of days. As you mentioned, there is going to be a lot of coverage surrounding Doc Rivers, a big name in the coaching hierarchy, taking over in Milwaukee with a big-time roster. Only adds to the fun of this season. I mean, I feel like this has been a heck of a ride from start to finish thus far. I shouldn't say finish, but as we get to the midway point here at the All-Star break, I mean, this season in general has just been wild, especially for Bucks fans. I mean, their pulse has, their blood pressure's got to be going through the roof with all the changes that they've seen.
Yeah, and you think about it real quick. I mean, you think about not only are they falling a little bit further behind Boston, but like we just mentioned, here come the Cavaliers who are making noise. Here are the Philadelphia 76ers with Nick Nurse that, apparently some people on Milwaukee wasn't crazy, but he was there for them if they want him. And he elected to go to Philadelphia, and look what they're doing. Here are the New York Knicks, who not necessarily a contender against Milwaukee, but they're 10-2 since they made their trade for OG. So the pack is getting tighter for that second spot. And let's see what happens down the stretch, because there are teams on the rise, and Milwaukee right now is not on the rise.
No, they definitely aren't. So, again, not shocked to see this news come through. Obviously, a little bit surprised. Who wouldn't be? One last tidbit here before we close down the show will be that I think is pretty fun with the Doc Rivers hiring is the fact that the two biggest contenders with the Milwaukee Bucks are the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers. Both have strong ties to Doc Rivers, especially the 76ers here as of most recently. So that should be fun to cover as well. I mean, obviously the fact that Doc's headed to Milwaukee, he's got to have some added motivation to beat those two teams. And that should be a fun thing to kind of watch as the year goes on and it becomes playoff crunch time.
Well, the joke on social media this evening was that at the time, a rumor of Doc Rivers going to Milwaukee all but assured Boston of reaching the Eastern Conference, or reaching the NBA Finals out of the Eastern Conference, because Doc's playoff record as a coach is less than illustrious, his championship notwithstanding. So that was the hidden joke, or not hidden joke, that was the joke going around social media.
Yeah, did you see that on Bruce Bernstein's feed by chance?
I did not, but I wouldn't put it past him to at least repost it or something.
Yeah. We definitely miss Bruce here tonight. I'm sure he's got some interesting thoughts on today's news out of Milwaukee with Adrian Griffin out and Doc Rivers in. We'll certainly be back with you next week to discuss this a little bit further. Obviously, get Bruce's thoughts on all of this as well, being our Celtics fan here at the top of the Eastern Conference. And we should have a lot more information too. I mean, there should be a lot that comes out by the next time we record, but certainly wanted to hop on here for an emergency podcast. This was huge news out of the NBA here today. And buckle up, folks. The fun is just beginning.
Absolutely.
It seemed like it was going to just be the Dame Lillard, Drew Holiday changing of the guards that shook up the league this year, especially in the East. But now we have a major change going from a first-year head coach in Adrian Griffin to Doc Rivers. So some big news there. And with that will do it for this edition of the 48 Minutes podcast on Believe, presented by BetOnline. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back with you next week to be sure you're up to date in 48 on all things around the association. Take care, everybody.